Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports College Football Show. I'm Cooper Battagna. That's Andrew Ivins, and Week 3 of college football is in the books, and we're going to talk about some former five stars. And Drew, speaking of former five stars, some breaking news on the NFL side. I know we're a college football show, but I got to ask you about this. Bryce Young, the former number one pick from just a year ago, is benched in favor of Andy Dalton. Do you have any thoughts on this whatsoever? Surprising, shocking? What do you think?
Well, I don't think we're going to hear Bryce Young be tossed around as the player comp anymore. How many times, Cooper, do we hear he's got some Bryce Young to his game? He's another Bryce Young. Look, Bryce Young was the exception to the exceptions. Obviously, it hasn't worked out here in the NFL. Just based on what he's done the first 2 weeks, you said it, Cooper, we're a college football show. We're a high school recruiting analyst. I don't know. I thought there was a lot of questions. I thought that after his rookie season. So shocking for sure. And I think it kind of shakes up how talent evaluators are going to view that quarterback position moving forward.
Yeah, I hope he figures it out. David Canales coming over from the Tampa Bay Bucks, the rookie head coach. David Tepper, the owner, already in some hot water there. I don't know if you could get off to a worse start than the Carolina Panthers, but here we are. But let's get back to some college football, and we'll start the show like we always started with our freshman flowers, and we give our week 3 freshman flowers. Drew, I think I had the tee box last week, so I'll let you have the honors this week.
How about Ryan Wingo, right? What's the big word coming out of Austin? It's Arch Manning. But how about one of those guys that was catching passes from Arch? And that was Ryan Wingo, a five-star wide receiver for us. 3 catches, over 100 yards receiving. Cooper, I keep going back in our heads to him throughout the evaluation process. He's a guy that off the hoof, he blows you away. 210 pounds, electric track and field markers. You put on the high school tape. This is a guy that's returning kicks, making people miss in the return game on punts. A lot to like. I'll admit, I'm a little surprised Ryan Wingo has had so much success so early, given what Texas has in that wide receiver room. But Steve Sarkisian, this is a guy that he zeroed in on very early in the recruiting process. Cooper, what I also think is notable, you look at explosive plays so far for these true freshman wide receivers. At the top of the list, you got Jeremiah Smith with 4. Tied with him is Ryan Wingo with 4. Ryan Wingo has a way lower number when it comes to the snap share. This guy is an explosive playmaker.
It's pretty funny how this class has kind of burst on the scene. We talked about it, about a generational class, how many receivers we talked about going in that top 32, had a five-star next to their name. Ryan Wingo was one of those guys. That class is 2027 NFL evaluators already looking at that class. Ryan Wingo probably going to figure to be a big part of that conversation as well. Drew, I'm going to stick on offense, and I'm going to stick in the SEC. I'm going to go with Caden Durham at LSU. LSU been trying to figure it out in their running game. A lot of expectations coming in with that big offensive line behind Will Campbell, Emory Jones. They got it going a little bit, but it was Caden Durham, the freshman, not Caleb Jackson, not Joshua Williams, but Caden Durham out of Duncanville High School. Drew, what a day for him. 11 carries, 98 yards, 2 touchdowns that come from behind victory for the Tigers, and they needed it. They beat South Carolina 36-33 in what was a pretty crazy game, Drew. I don't know if you watched much of that, but they needed everything they got from Caden Durham, especially when they got down in the red zone. Drew, you and I were talking about it before the show. This one was one of your favorite backs in the country all last year.
He was, Cooper, and I'm kind of irritated with myself. I have Caleb Jackson in our Dynasty College Football League. I've been trying to wait to see who's going to be the hot hand there for the LSU Tigers, and it is Caden Durham. And I'm not surprised. Duncanville, one of the top high school programs in all of America. What are they also known for besides winning a ton of football games? How about that speed? Caden Durham has got it very creative at the second level. I thought he was the best running back down the stretch in the 2024 class. You look at what he did in the state playoffs. You look at what he did in the Polynesian Bowl. Hard for running backs to shine in that all-star setting, but I thought he had the best day of anyone out in Hawaii. You also had Dylan Raiola there, so that is saying a lot. I think he's going to certainly be a name to know, and I'm trying to get him on waivers this week in the Dynasty League.
All right, pretty crazy you think about that Duncanville offense, right? Five-star Keelan Russell committed to Alabama currently. You have Decoria Moore, another five-star committed to Oregon, the number 1 receiver in the country. Then you had Caden Durham last year as well. So LSU looks like they got another good one. Little Clyde Edwards-Helaire there. I didn't think much of that out of high school. I thought he was more straight line, but he showed some good things and a lot of similarities there. If they can get him going, LSU offense looks to be ticking in the right direction. All right, Drew. one of those other guys, been linked to Jeremiah Smith in the past. They played at the same high school. We were kind of waiting for this guy to emerge a little bit as Grayson McCall struggled. How about CJ Bailey at NC State?
Yeah, he's my second one, sticking with the theme of good high school programs there at Chaminade Madonna Prep. CJ Bailey, this is a kid that has been on the scene for a long time. I thought he put it together as a senior. And you're right, Cooper. We've been talking about that quarterback situation there in Raleigh. Well, Grayson McCall goes down. In steps CJ Bailey, who people inside that program have called him a freak. I mean, he is 6'6", pushing 200 pounds, runs a 4.5 in the 40-yard dash. He steps in, rallies the Wolfpack from an 11-point halftime deficit to take down Louisiana Tech 30-20. It wasn't pretty at times. CJ kind of struggled, but I thought he got hot as the game progressed. Cooper completed 13 of 20 passes, 156 yards, also ran 4 times for 27 yards. 2 big-time throws from PFF, passer grade of 73.5. We'll see what happens with Grayson McCall, but NC State, they travel to Clemson here in week 4. I think CJ Bailey is someone you need to get involved. And I wrote about it on CBS Sports last week in the Talent Tracker, right? Dylan Raiola, DJ Lagway, those are the 2 freshman quarterbacks everyone knows. Keep an eye on the CJ Bailey kid. Continue to hear good things. And the biggest, kind of trait he has, what he has going for, he wins games, Cooper. He did it, and he elevates the talent around him. I'm excited to see if he gets a chance this weekend against Dabo and the Tigers.
He will get the start for Grayson McCall this weekend in NC State, currently, I think, an 18-point dog in that game. So expectations a little bit tempered for NC State, obviously, after a little uneven start to the season. But Drew, CJ Bailey, you turn on the tape from that game, I thought some highs, some lows, but he did some really good things that I think are very encouraging for Dave Doeren in NC State to kind of build around, especially getting Noah Rogers involved in the passing game as well. So CJ Bailey, a name to watch out for, and a name that we already know because we talk about him every week. He's got a bouquet of flowers. About Ryan Williams at Alabama, Drew. I mean, I think the narrative is pretty funny around Ryan Williams. Everybody knows he's 17 years of age, but Drew, he just keeps doing what he keeps doing, and that is producing big-time plays. No exception this week. 4 receptions, 78 yards, a touchdown. Alabama absolutely stomps Wisconsin 42-10. Drew, he is averaging 28.5 yards per reception. Somehow, this looks as easy as it did for him in high school. The number 3 ranked receiver, only behind Jeremiah Smith and Cam Coleman. Ryan Williams, Drew, just continuing to get it done. And I don't know if I'm just surprised, shocked, or anything. I expected him to be good, but this good this early, even to us who watch this guy very closely, it's a little surprising, I must admit.
Coop, we've talked so much about kind of these wide receivers, right? Jeremiah Smith, Cam Coleman, Ryan Williams. I went back into the file this morning when looking at Ryan Williams. Remember the reclassification thing, that is so notable. I mean, he was there in Camp Randall catching a touchdown pass over the weekend. He should have been playing in a high school football game. But this is a kid that was a 2-time Mr. Football in Alabama. Did it as a sophomore and a junior. Well, really, that was his senior season. 2-time Gatorade Player of the Year in the Yellowhammer State. That's never been done before. And this kid has done it. He has been the dude the entire time. We saw him at the All-Star games. And the other thing that Cooper that stands out, in high school, he averaged a touchdown every 4 times he touched the ball. That is quickly translated to Alabama, right? So if you're going to reclassify, if you're going to jump classes, you have to be the dude. Ryan Williams is that dude.
Dude is an absolute dog. All right, Drew, let's give Matt Rhule, Nebraska, their flowers. I mean, we talked about a lot of freshmen. Dylan Raiola, obviously the face of that program right now, really young in the season. But they got some other guys getting it done. Who do you like here out of this group?
Ja'Cory Barney, wide receiver. The buzz coming out of camp is that they wanted to get this guy involved in a variety of different ways. You go back to Nebraska's spring game. Again, Dylan Raiola was kind of the headline of that. But Ja'Cory Barney would have had I think, 90-yard kickoff return. He ended up getting tackled by the specialist because they weren't wearing different jerseys. But you knew that they believed in him, just giving him that role early on his first few months on campus. Well, this past weekend, Nebraska takes down Northern Iowa. Ja'Cory Barney scores on a 10-yard touchdown run. They're using him as that slot receiver, and it seems as the season has progressed, they've gotten him more and more involved. And as Dylan Raiola gets more comfortable in the pocket, I think he's someone to absolutely know as they get into the heart of the Big Ten play. This weekend, big game Friday night against Illinois. So Ja'Cory Barney, for me, graded him as a 3-star. I'm already regretting him not being a 4-star prospect for us on 24/7 Sports.
Big game this weekend against the Illini. I'm looking forward to that one. But Drew, I'm going to stick with Nebraska. How about wide receiver Carter Nelson, not tight end? That's what we thought he would be. Maybe he grows into a tight end. But Drew, he had himself a day as well. 4 receptions, 48 yards, and a touchdown in Nebraska's win over Northern Iowa. Drew, this guy, big fan of. We like the athlete, 8-man football, elite level guy on the basketball court, track and field background as well. Did a little bit of everything. We saw him at the All-American Bowl. Kind of stood out. Maybe it kind of felt a little bit big for him at times, but showed some flashes later in the week in San Antonio. Drew starting to put it together a little bit now. Some of these guys emerging for Dylan Raiola in the passing game as Nebraska is getting it going, trying to go for a 4-0 start. And there you have it, the freshman flowers from week 3 of the season. Next, coming up, 2023 quarterbacks. We got Arch, Nico, Jackson Arnold, big week 4s ahead. Stick with us. All right, Drew. Everybody loves a little revisionist history. And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the 2022 quarterback class. And you think about that class, Cade Klubnik, Drew Aller, Connor Wigman, how it's faring so far. If I was a betting man, I would say there's a little bit more promise in terms of Sunday promise when you're evaluating the 2023 class and you look at some of the names at the top, Arch Manning, Nico Iamaleava, you go down the list, maybe guys like Jackson Arnold, Avery Johnson, Aiden Childs all stand out a little bit as well. And here you see the top 15 ranked quarterbacks in the year of 2023. Drew, some hits. It's still early, but it looks to be some misses in there as well. We'll talk about some other guys. Dante Moore, he's already transferred from UCLA to Oregon. Malachi Nelson from USC to Boise State. Jaden Rashada, what happens to him? One and done at Arizona State, then over to Georgia. Drew, a couple of these guys we're still trying to figure out. But like I said, the cool part about this show is that we can get into hypotheticals. So if you and I had a magic wand and we went back to those ranking calls just 2 years ago, how would we shake out the top 5, Drew? I'm going to give you the honors here because I really kind of want to see your thoughts on what the top 5 quarterback rankings of Andrew Ivins would look like.
All right, Coop. Well, I think it's cheating here, right? Because we've had a lot of sample size to some of these guys. I think a few of them 4 starts underneath their belt. A few more have been in that spot duty type of role. And some of them we haven't even seen. They're kind of sitting behind some veterans, some guys that have transferred in. If I was going to go back, number 1 for me, top of the board, I would have Arch Manning. I already know what your answer is going to be here. I'm interested to see where you go. I'd have Arch Manning number 1, Nico Iamaleava number 2, Aiden Childs 3, Avery Johnson 4, Jackson Arnold 5. So I think there's some surprises there, Coop. Where are you kind of like, whoa, in terms of my rankings here?
The Aiden Childs one to me for you, because I know coming into the season you were like, hey, let's pump the brakes a little bit. And the start has been a little bit sporadic. I mean, you watch Aiden Childs on tape, you have no idea what's coming next. You don't know if he's going to throw a 70-yard bomb to Andrew Marsh. You don't know if he's going to throw it straight to a defender. That's the type of feel that I have on Aiden Childs. We liked Avery Johnson coming out. I think he's probably exactly where we thought he would be. And Jackson Arnold, one of those high floor guys, still trying to figure it out. The interesting conversation, Drew, is at the top, right, between Arch Manning and Nico Iamaleava. And for us at 24/7 Sports, that's exactly how we ranked them, 1 and 2. We had Arch at 1, Nico at number 2. I think it's going to be really interesting because Nico, he's got that first test this season at Oklahoma in a primetime game against Jackson Arnold. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But, Drew, here is my top 5. I'm going to flip-flop number 2 and number 1. I'm going to go Nico at number 1. And then at number 3, Aiden Childs, Avery Johnson at number 4. Excuse me, yes, Avery Johnson at number 4, and Eli Holstein at number 5. How about the ringer coming in at number 5? Eli Holstein, the Alabama transfer. But, Drew, for me, let's start at the top. Nico, I just think the talent, even going back to high school, I think the biggest question mark coming out of Nico's high school campaign was a lack of experience. He had some concussion issues as well. Can he string it together? And I think, one, he's in the perfect system under Josh Heupel there in Knoxville. For him to be able to sit his first year you're seeing the dividends of that redshirt season as well. And I think Nico has pressed all the right buttons in terms of his first, I would say, 18 months in Knoxville. Has done a tremendous job. Big test, like I said, this weekend. Arch Manning, obviously, still somebody that we are very high on. And Drew, I kind of had this in my head. Here's the thought that was percolating a little bit. I would not be shocked if in 2 years you see Nico Iamaleava as the first pick in the draft, and then the year after that, maybe Arch Manning's in the conversation for the #1 pick in the draft. I think we got those two pegged. I think Aiden Childs is really a wild card. I think Avery Johnson, you're going to have to kind of fall in love with in terms of scheming up and putting the offense and the personnel around him. And then Eli Holstein, Drew, let's talk about him a little bit. I mean, we saw what he did against Cincinnati on the road, another comeback victory again this week against West Virginia. He is a big physical kid. He was an elite tester. He's kind of got a little bit of like Ben Roethlisberger to him, the way that he continues to improvise and extend plays with his legs. He's a fun kid. I thought he put some really good things on tape this past weekend against West Virginia, but in my eyes, that's going to be a fun one to continue to watch develop over the next couple years.
What's crazy about Eli Holstein, you go back to Pitt's preseason camp, he was not the clear-cut #1, right? There was some kind of question marks about who was going to be that guy. I think he's the perfect fit for new offensive coordinator Cade Bell's offense, right? Wants to move that quarterback around. Coop, let's go back to the top, right? The Nico versus Arch debate we got going on there. You are one of the few people in the recruiting world, the scouting world, that actually got a chance to see Arch play in high school. Remember, this kid did not play 7-on-7. He wasn't at the Elite 11 finals. Are you surprised based on what we have seen from him so far? And really, I think against UTSA this past weekend, that was kind of our most exposure to him. He had that 67-yard touchdown run. I was with some people over the weekend, and they're like, whoa, I didn't know that Arch could run like that. And that was kind of how it went for us behind the scenes in the scouting, right? He has NFL arm. He's an elite decision maker. He can process like few others. But here's the thing, unlike his famous uncles, he's a little bit more athletic. And I think you would agree with that. We saw kind of that dual threat prowess in high school from him.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. I like the athlete. I kind of compared him to Joe Burrow in that way, another guy that was a multi-sport athlete in high school. But did I think that Arch Manning would be ripping off 67-yard runs, creating a little bit of separation at the FBS level? Absolutely not. I didn't know he had that in his bag. I think that would be giving us a little bit too much credit in terms of evaluating the athlete there. I'll tell you this, Drew. He was 9 of 12. He threw for 223 yards, 4 touchdowns. He had another one on the ground, that 67-yard run that I mentioned. He did all that in spot duty. I think the biggest thing that kind of stands out is that he was prepared to go into that game and take over that game against a Texas San Antonio team, albeit that says a lot that Texas was able to do what they did to him, and which is why they're ranked the #1 team in the country, according to the Associated Press. I was more impressed with just the way that he went in and he executed. I like what he did through the air. He's a mobile quarterback. He seems maybe a little bit more comfortable outside of the pocket when you start moving him a little bit. Drew, I thought this. We talked about it this morning. The 3 incompletions tell me a little bit more about where Arch currently is in his development, more so than the 9 completions that went for explosive plays on some of those. You saw a little of that to Isaiah Bond, Ryan Wingo, another touchdown to Wingo as well. And what I mean by that is timing, anticipation, got sacked on a nickel blitz. I think all those things take reps, and it's a really interesting situation because if Arch gets his first start this week against ULM, as Quinn Ewers continues to rehab from an ab injury, it's a really best of both worlds situation for Steve Sarkisian, because Arch Manning needs these reps. As much as people want to anoint him saying he's ready to play, and in a lot of ways he is, there's still going to be some growing pains that are going to come with him playing and seeing some live bullets on Saturday. But Drew, I mean, in terms of seeing where he was a year ago in those limited snaps to seeing where he was on Saturday night, I think this guy's got everything out in front of him. I'm more excited about Arch Manning than I ever have been, quite honestly.
I'm excited about Nico. You said needs the reps, right? Traveling to Oklahoma this weekend, first SEC home game for the Sooners. You know it's going to be loud there. And Nico has never really been in this type of environment. That's what I'm interested to see. And if we want to go back to him throughout the scouting process, first time I ever saw Nico throw in person, and I've said it before in this space. I mean, this was a 6'5" Polynesian kid that is skinny in pajama pants throwing absolute missiles to all three levels on a 7-on-7 field. It was kind of like, whoa, who is this guy? And it's been fun for me sitting in this chair, and same for you, to see how college football media, see how some of these NFL scouts have reacted to him. Now, I want to see how he's going to be able to handle himself in an environment like that. And with Josh Heupel's offense, you look at what the Vols have been able to do the past few weeks. They want to run the football. They want to use that run to set up the pass. He gets it out so fast. So for me, Nico, a kid, I just want to see what it's going to look like when there is some adversity, when some things don't go right. We saw a little bit of it against NC State. I think there's more questions about the Wolfpack than we initially thought, but Brent Venables in that defense, R. Mason Thomas on the edge, they're going to come after Nico. They can run with him. They can try to mushroom him in that pocket and not allow him to escape. So I think a big test for him. I think we're going to learn a lot. Coop, the other thing, back to my top five, I just want to get this in here. Avery Johnson, it seems to either people love him or they don't like him. I want to say this. Avery Johnson's the only one on the list with 2 ranked wins right now, right? He's got 2 ranked wins over his belt. I thought he was awesome this past week against Arizona. I don't know if you saw the game. Yeah, he was 14 of 23 for 156 and 2 touchdowns, but he also ran for 110 yards. Big fan of Avery Johnson.
He's got to get more consistent as a passer, but everything else he does from a pure playmaking standpoint just makes you kind of fall in love with him, and he finds ways to win. He didn't play exceptionally well against Tulane, Drew, but he made the plays when it mattered the most. You turn on the Arizona game, I thought that's the best that he's looked from a pure passing standpoint, and there's so much room to grow. He's gotten better and better every year. I think these reps that we talk about with Arch Manning, with Nico Iamaleava going on the road against Oklahoma, the same thing, the maturation process for an Avery Johnson, for Aiden Childs. This is such a luxury for these guys to be able to have this type of experience this young in their career. They will certainly benefit from that a couple years down the line. Drew, real quick, a little bit of a lightning round, but let's do some buy or sell on some guys that still haven't found their way to the field yet. And all 3 guys, a little bit of a transfer. And we'll go quick on this, but Dante Moore transfers from UCLA to Oregon now with Will Stein there, the offensive coordinator. You buying or selling on the future of Dante Moore?
I want to buy because I loved him so much coming out, the way he was wired, what he was able to do at Martin Luther King High School up there in Detroit. I thought there were some flashes as a freshman at UCLA, Cooper, but I'm actually going to sell here. Austin Novosad, the other quarterback there, number 2 on the depth chart. I've heard from some college staffers. They are very high on him. So that is a battle. Do you want to look towards 2025 post Dylan Gabriel, Austin Novosad, Dante Moore? Who's going to take over under center for Dan Lanning?
All right, I'm buying Dante Moore stock, and for a lot of the reason that you just said, it just kind of infatuated through with him throughout the high school process. And I believe in Will Stein. It becomes more about Will Stein than it does Dante Moore, but I think they can figure things out. Jaden Rashada now at Georgia by way of Arizona State. Buying or selling?
I'm selling this one as well. I think I'm going to sell all of these. Interesting, Coop. We were talking about, right, when we flashed the top 15 quarterback rankings, I think the 2 we had the most questions about off the field, right? So not on-field talent, how they throw the football, was Jaden Rashada and Malachi Nelson. Malachi's already transferred to Boise State. He is not the starting quarterback for the Broncos this season. Jaden Rashada, he was going to go to Florida, ends up at Arizona State. Now he's at Georgia. I'm just a little skeptical. With that being said, I think if there is one place to be, one building to be in where they're going to get you right, it is there at Georgia under the direction of Kirby Smart. Think about it, Cooper. He faces that defense every single day in practice. So for me, I'm selling because I think Georgia, kind of like some of the young pieces they got there, Ryan Puglisi, Gunnar Stockton, you hear good things about him, but we'll see. I could be completely wrong here.
Whole recruitment's been a little bit of a circus. You turn on the tape against Arizona, it's one game. Drew, not a lot to be excited about. I'm selling that stock as well. But if there was one place to get it right, strong run game, good offensive line, Mike Bobo's system, I think they could figure it out there. All right, last one, Austin Mack, the reclassification out of Folsom High School in Sacramento. He goes to Washington with Kalen DeBoer, then follows him down to Tuscaloosa. You buying or selling here?
I'm selling. And you want to know why? 2 words, Keelan Russell.
Yeah, I do.
Their quarterback commit in 2025. Another big win over the weekend for Keelan Russell and Duncanville. They take down St. Francis Academy. He was the difference. I think he's an elite playmaker. I think what he fits what DeBoer wants to do on offense. Like me some Austin Mack, but we talk about the reclassifications, Cooper, skipping that senior year of high school. It sets you back from a developmental standpoint. I think Austin Mack's kind of going through it a little bit there in Tuscaloosa.
That big physical kid, liked what we saw from him out of high school, Drew. I still think he needs to figure it out. He was a developmental guy. He needed that senior year of high school. He skipped it, goes to UW, now to Tuscaloosa with Kalen DeBoer, like I mentioned before. They need continuity. All these young signal callers do. If not, it's going to be a little bit troublesome. So we'll see what happens there. The 2023 quarterback class continuing to make noises. We'll keep an eye on that in the future. We'll also keep an eye on Billy Napier and the Florida Gators. The Sunshine State Blues is what we're calling it. We'll talk everything Gators right after this break. Tough time to be a Florida fan right now, Drew. 1-2, 33-20 loss against Texas A&M. How about the Aggies, Mike Elko? They haven't won a SEC road game in 3 years. Well, guess what? They did it on Saturday against Florida. And Drew, when it rains, it pours, both literally and figuratively. That's what happened in Gainesville on Saturday. And where do you go from here if you're Billy Napier, Drew? It just seems like the clock is almost getting ready to strike midnight on his time in Florida, in Gainesville. Drew, you were at the game. I don't know why you continue to subject yourself to this, but what was your kind of mood tracker on Saturday in Florida?
Oh, Coop, I want to see some future NFL players. You look at that Texas A&M front seven, all right? They got some dudes right there. I was interested in checking them out. You called it the Sunshine State. That's how you teased this segment. Well, it rained in Gainesville. Right at halftime, Florida's down 20-0. I thought it was very fitting, picturistic of the Billy Napier era here in Gainesville. Coop, the swamp is drained. It used to be an intimidating place to play. I've been to 2 games this season. Doesn't feel that way at all. You got Miami players celebrating with Florida recruits, Texas A&M fans partying there. It's the stadium emptied out in the third quarter. I've never seen so many people leave. I don't know what is wrong with Florida. You could think it's the quarterback situation. I can't tell you after Saturday if Graham Mertz should be the guy or DJ Lagway should be the guy because they have so many more issues, right? I think it starts with that offensive line. Florida has 2 full-time offensive line coaches, and that unit just continues to disappoint. They can't block for Graham Mertz. They can't block for DJ Lagway. They can't block anyone. Sure, they can create some time for the quarterbacks against Samford, but against really good fronts like Miami and Texas A&M, I mean, the offense has no chance. The wide receivers, they're not making plays. And then I think an issue what most people aren't talking about, Cooper, is that secondary. The safety play is just so bad. So you're right. The clock is ticking. I can tell you boots on the ground. It seems like Billy Napier, that era is going to be coming to a close relatively soon because I don't think the fan base has any hope or belief in him anymore.
All right, put your AD hat on for a second. How does this play out over the next couple of weeks? You look at their schedule here at Mississippi State, coming off a grueling loss to Toledo at home, 41-17. Then you have a bye week, and then you got Central Florida at home. Circle that game. I'll come back to that. Then, Drew, you go on the road at Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, at Texas. In my head, Drew, there is no possible way he gets to that LSU game in the middle of November. I think the earliest that you could see Billy Napier out is as soon as next week if they find a way to lose that game in Starkville. After that UCF game, Drew, I think Gus Malzahn has the ability to put one right through Billy Napier's heart.
Coop, I don't know when it's going to happen, but no one is talking about the fact that it needs to happen as soon as possible. We are under 3 months until the early signing period. Florida's recruiting class right now doesn't have an offensive lineman in it. No O-lineman committed. And right, you're not going to get someone from the high school ranks that you can plug and play in 2025. But I do think that kind of speaks to the issue that Florida has, right? You have all this money and resources and coaches invested into your offensive line. You got, 5=1. Well, they don't have anything at that department. So whoever, as soon as they can make a change and get someone else in, they can start recruiting for that early signing period. And the other thing, Cooper, is that transfer portal. That transfer portal window opens up in December as well. and it's going to be open season on Florida's roster. Yeah, DJ Lagway is going to be a big target, but they got some other nice young pieces, LJ McCray, Cam James. Whoever takes over for Billy Napier, should he exit, they're going to have to play a lot of roster defense, and then they're going to have to go out and get some people to bring to Florida. So I think the sooner the better in terms of Florida turning things around.
Great point. More about defense at this point when it comes to the transfer portal. Obviously, that roster will need a lot of work. But Drew, I know it's early, but at the same time, I can feel this being the national conversation like a week or two from now. So maybe we're just a little bit aggressive here when it comes to this conversation. Is there a name or two maybe you just find interesting, right? We're not suggesting anybody, but you would say, oh, wow, that would kind of make me a little curious if that's the name that they decided to target in the wake if Billy Napier ends up getting fired.
I don't have a name. I'm going to toss it back to you on a name. I'll say this. They are going to have to hire someone that has done it at the Power 4 level before. Again, I was in Gainesville talking with a lot of Florida fans. I don't think they're going to allow them to take another coach that has not won in the SEC, that has not done it at the highest levels. No more projects, no more up-and-comers. They want a proven winner. So, Coop, I don't know. I'm sure you're going to say Lane Kiffin. Give us another name.
No, it's going to be a skinny market. I think there's only really kind of realistically maybe 2 to 3 names. Maybe I'm underestimating a couple candidates that could come out of the blue here. But yeah, I'm sure Kiffin's going to be attached to this job. The other name would be Eli Drinkwitz. I think both of those guys are going to be very difficult to get out of their spots because both Missouri and Ole Miss have done a phenomenal job giving both Eli Drinkwitz and Lane Kiffin everything they need to compete year in and year out. So Florida going to be in another tough spot. Who's going to make the decision for Florida as well? I think that's going to be another big question. So Florida really going to be one of those teams to continue to monitor over the next couple of weeks as the coaching carousel could start spinning a little bit earlier than usual this year. And after that, speaking of duds, we got studs and duds coming up right after this break. All right, time for studs and duds of week 3 of college football. Drew, my favorite segment on this show. And we talked about this guy a little bit, but how about Arch Manning, man? We gave him his flowers. Now we're going to anoint him as a stud. Let me repeat the stat line. Comes in the second quarter in place of Quinn Ewers, who exits the game with an ab injury against Texas San Antonio. And from there, Drew, holy moly, 9 of 12. 223 yards, 4 touchdowns, 67-yard run on the ground as well. That athleticism, that sneaky, that deceptive athleticism of Arch Manning, as the people like to call it. Texas cruised to a 56-7 win over Texas San Antonio. They got ULM, then they got Mississippi State, then they got a bye week, then they got Oklahoma. Drew, it's setting up nice for Texas if Arch does have to go maybe next week or the week beyond. They're in a really good spot. Drew, like I said before, I think you and it's always not a pleasant surprise, but we want to see these guys rank well, especially when you rank them as the number 1 player in the country. There's a lot of conversation around Arch playing two-way football. If his name was Arch Smith, he'd be a 3-star, all that type of stuff. I know it's early, but I think we can put that to bed. I loved what I saw from him.
Must-watch TV this weekend when they potentially his first career start?
I think so. Absolutely. I think anytime you got a Manning name attached, the level of excitement that he brings, certainly a reason to turn on the TV and watch some Arch Manning. But speaking of must-watch TV, Tetairoa McMillan, dude. I mean, talk about a dominant force. Drew, talk to us.
Yeah, you stole my punchline. I was going to say, I got some must-watch TV for you. Anytime Arizona is on a screen, you got to find Tetairoa McMillan. T-Mac, this guy is unreal. This past Friday, I love the spot, Arizona versus Kansas State. Wife was like, why are we watching this game? I'm like, you got to see this kid, T-Mac. He is the real deal. And Avery Johnson, 11 catches, 138 yards. Cooper, he consistently draws double coverage. Arizona's lone touchdown came when they were down inside the 10, right? One-on-one situation. Well, Kansas State brings a safety over because they don't want to leave their corner on an island. That just opens up a running lane. Running back goes right inside. T-Mac's best catch of the night. They didn't give it to him. Acrobatic on the sidelines, tries to get a toe down. He is fun to watch. He's a real deal. I think you could put him on an NFL field right now, and he would make plays. He would start in the league. And I know that praise has been thrown around about a guy like Jeremiah Smith, but T-Mac really is the real deal. Love how they always bring up his volleyball background, fluid route runner for his size. And, when I was watching that game, and we've had more exposure recently to Jeremiah Smith, I think there's some similarities in those two, just in terms of how big they are and how they move at their size. Sink the hips, get out, attack the football. T-Mac is a treat to watch. He's got that chemistry with Noah Fafita. They've been playing together since they were pups. Really fun to watch. We only got a few more games of him, and then it's going to be on Sundays. That's where you're going to have to catch him, on the Red Zone.
I don't know who that is more of a compliment to, whether that's T-Mac or whether it's Jeremiah Smith. I mean, both those guys, same conversation, the best at what they do. Drew, how about this one for me? A dud. Mississippi State losing at home to Toledo 41-17. Pretty embarrassing, Drew. The Rockets, they returned the 119th out of 133 most production in the FBS. Mississippi State, Jeff Lebby, Drew, I think we had some expectations coming into year one. They were tempered a little bit, but this one is rough. Not to mention, you got to dish out $1.2 million to the team that just absolutely thumped you. I don't know, Drew. Florida, Mississippi State, I have no idea. Josh Pate said that one's going to be diabolical. I mean, he stole the words right out of my mouth. That game is going to be pretty entertaining just to see who comes out on the other end.
Cooper, real quick, did you see Toledo head coach Jason Candle's quote after the win at Mississippi State?
I saw that. Spicy. Loved it.
Yeah. What do you say? Mississippi State, that's the type of school that comes after our players and tampers with them. And I am paraphrasing here. I love that coming from Jason Candle, who had a first-round pick in Kenyon Mitchell. He's saying, hey, you can come to Toledo. You can win games on the road in the SEC, and we can get you ready for the NFL. I love that as a dud. Just what is going on there in Starkville? Cooper, staying in the SEC, my dud. How about Georgia's tight ends, right? We bill this as one of the best rooms in all of college football. Georgia ekes out a win on the road at Kentucky. And if you watch the game, you dig into the All-22, I think they miss Brock Bowers. It was a rough one for Oscar Delp. He graded out as Georgia's worst offensive player, according to PFF. Terrible in the run game. He couldn't anchor, and I think that really hurt the Bulldogs. Lawson Lucky, he played a little bit. Carson Beck was off target, but for a unit that gets praised so much by me and you, and for good reason, I thought this was one of their worst performances in a long, long time. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why Kentucky was able to hang around and have a chance. So bounce back coming for Georgia's tight ends? I think so. You look at how Todd Hartley recruits the room. There's a lot of talent there, but they got to get better when it matters.
Yeah, they'll figure it out. But like you said, I mean, there are a ton of expectations coming into the season between Delp, Lucky, Urasic coming over from Stanford, freshman all-team Pac-12 over there as well. They have a lot of talent, maybe one of the more talented tight end rooms in the country. They need more production. But, Drew, watching Brock Bowers on Sunday against Baltimore, it just is a reminder of how good that man was at football, dominated for 3 years at the collegiate ranks. Drew, my stud, how about Barry Odom? Give some love to UNLV and what they're doing. They get a big win over Kansas on the road, 23-20. And, Drew, you got to love UNLV out of the group of five right now and their chances. They still have teams like Oregon State. They have teams like Boise State left on their schedule. But this is the first time since 1984 the Runnin' Rebels have started the season 3-0. Barry Odom, Drew, he's got the experience at Missouri. Obviously, that didn't work out, but a little bit of a career rejuvenation here in Las Vegas. Maybe that's a name to keep an eye on here later on in the fall as the coaching carousel starts to get moving a little bit. Brennan Marion, the OC as well, used to be the former receivers coach at Texas, running that go-go offense. UNLV, Drew, they got Syracuse coming up, Fran Brown in 2 weeks. They got a chance. If they take care of business, I think they will be the G5 representative in the college football playoff.
Coop, I'm glad you said Brennan Marion. He's the man calling plays for UNLV. I got a bet behind the scenes at 24/7 Sports. I think he will be hired somewhere as a group of five head coach this coaching carousel, right? I think he does a great job, marketing himself. I thought he was on full display Friday night. That is a name to know. Coop, my last stud. How about UCF and Gus Malzahn? You just mentioned them. They face Florida here pretty soon, but over the weekend, they storm back at TCU, down 21 points in the third quarter. They go on to win 35-34. KJ Jefferson, it's been kind of a up and down start for him, but he was money in the fourth quarter when UCF needed him. The Arkansas transfer, big reason why they get the win. I think this is notable because the Knights last year, first year in the Big 12, they went 2-4 on the road. I think we always forget about when you change conferences, when you move up, there is an initial adjustment period. To me, UCF going and winning at TCU, this shows that they can play this season in the Big 12. Schedule setting up nice. They have a chance to get to potentially 5-0 if they can take down Florida. If Florida can't stop the run, UCF can run the football behind R.J. Harvey. Knights currently ranked number 2 nationally, 375.6 yards per game on the ground. They're a wagon when it comes to running the football.
All right, Drew, on the accelerator here, my last stud, UCLA, Deshaun Foster. You get the win over Hawaii in week 0. You got a bye week. And then your first game in your new conference, you lose 42-13 to smoking Curt Cignetti and the Indiana Hoosiers. Absolutely unacceptable, Drew. You do this in the Rose Bowl as well. The next week, guess what? You got LSU, then you got Oregon, then you got Penn State. UCLA, Drew, I don't know. You go back to the press conference with Deshaun Foster, you're just like, I don't know if I get this at all. And then you see this on the field, a little bit of a head scratcher. I'm a little worried about this one. Who's your last stud?
Florida State, 0-3. You watch the game. I don't know what's going on there in Tallahassee. DJU catching all the flag, just like Florida, that offensive line. They can't block anyone.
All right, stick with us. First-year head coaches, over, under, exceeding expectations. We'll talk about that as we give our final thoughts next. 13 first-year head coaches in the Power Four, if you include Oregon State and Trent Bray, and we're going to include them, Pac-2, Pac-12, we don't know. But, Drew, let's talk about some notable first-year head coaches, whether or not they've exceeded expectations or underwhelmed a little bit in first year. I talked about smoking Curt Cignetti in Indiana. Drew, talk to me. You love this guy.
I do. Hoosiers are 3-0. Cooper, when we talk about Indiana football, normally starts and then it stops, right? You don't talk about it come basketball season. I think IU fans are going to be talking about the product on the gridiron. Next 3 games for Indiana: Charlotte, Maryland, at Northwestern. Then they got a bye week. They could be 6-0 when they face Dylan Raiola in Nebraska. Curt Cignetti has won 17 of his last 18 games. Coach Cooper, that one loss was in overtime to App State. Curtis Rorick, if you haven't seen him, completing 74.3% of his passes.
All right, let me talk a little bit about Michigan State. I'll start with Jonathan Smith and Michigan State. Not the sexiest hire, Drew, but I love this guy. Everything that he did in Corvallis, now what he's doing there at Michigan State. Aiden Childs, we talked about the young quarterback, Andrew Marsh as well, guy that we're fired up about. And the other side, Sherrone Moore, Drew, that quarterback situation, a little bit tricky there. Davis Warren, Alex Orji going to get the start this week. I just feel like it could have been buttoned up a little bit more. I thought they should have brought in some competition. Recruiting, still wait and see mode, so we'll see what happens there. Guys, we appreciate you joining us as always, and like I always say at the end of the show, every week, the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel is where you find all the latest and greatest recruiting information and college football news. Guys, we appreciate you joining us as always. For the best, Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Battagna. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.